Eucharistic adoration, I think a lot of people think you can't go if you have kids, which it's like, I'm not going to lie, it's harder. It's trickier. I had this old man give me such a dirty look. I thought his face was going to turn inside out. But, Jesus spoke, let the children come to me. I'm going to let his thoughts and his words mean more to me than this man that maybe he has something else going on. Maybe he was grumpy about something else. I don't know.
God has a dream specifically for you. And if you don't play your part, it won't get played. And if your part doesn't get played, I assure you, souls can be lost. The world doesn't need another John Paul II or Mother Teresa. The world needs you. And your ordinary life has an extraordinary mission. Now is your time.
You're listening to the Extraordinary Mission Podcast with Dr. John Wood. Dr. John Wood is an optometrist, author, speaker, and saint in the making. He has published 3 books and speaks across the country, energizing the church to pursue our extraordinary mission. And now, your host, Dr. John Wood.
Welcome to the Extraordinary Mission Podcast. I am your host, John Wood, and this is a podcast where we talk about our extraordinary mission of becoming the saints God created us to be in the middle of our ordinary lives. The last book that I had published was called The Light Entrusted to You, and I named that book after the baptismal vows. During baptism, the priest or deacon gives us a candle as parents, and they tell us that this child is a child of the light of Christ, and it's our job to keep the flame of faith alive, that light's been entrusted to us. And so I have a kind of a passion for that, of helping parents to pass on the faith, and my guest today can really help us do that. Somebody that's been instrumental in helping our family the last few months, somebody I discovered, Nancy Bandzuch from Minnesota, who has a ministry, I guess, called Catholic Sprouts. We discovered her podcast last fall, and we have not missed a day since. It's just absolutely been a huge blessing for my family. She also has a lot of other great things that she offers parents. So I just want to say welcome to Nancy from Minnesota joining us. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Nancy.
Hi, it's really fun to be here.
Awesome. So first off, tell us just a little bit about yourself. So your family and your background, and what made you start this ministry of Catholic Sprouts.
Sure. So I'm Nancy. I am married to a great guy. We live just outside of Minneapolis. Well, that's not true. We live quite a ways outside of Minneapolis, but I'm a mother of 5. Our oldest is in 2nd grade, and our youngest just turned a year old. So I guess my ministry kind of came about haphazardly, but it is called Catholic Sprouts. So years and years ago, when I first became a stay-at-home mom, I just started doing, kind of the blogger thing online. And as my kids grew, I just really had a passion to find doable ways to pass on the faith, because it's a lot harder to do that than you think it's going to be when you're not a parent. Just when you have those real kids with the real whiny things, and, when there's kids that need, when there's multiple kids that need help, it can just be hard. So we started a daily podcast for Catholic kids about 2 years ago now. And it's really simple. It's just 5 minutes long. A lot of parents listen to it over breakfast or in the car. And it's just our way of allowing parents to teach the faith in an easier, sort of accessible way. And also, the more I get into this ministry, the more I realize that, kids need help with formation, but so do parents, because a lot of parents are new to the faith or had different formation experiences. So the most fruitful thing actually for me with this daily podcast is that it's an easy way for parents and children to learn together. And then it opens up an opportunity to discuss. Like this over Lent right now, we're going through a lot of the deadly sins like greed and sloth and pride in a way that's accessible for the whole family, of course. But what's nice is that we can go into some specifics and just open up those conversations for how does this sin affect adults and children, and we also do a lot of lighter topics too. But I value it as a parent myself to listen to it every morning over breakfast. And it's just a nice way to turn something on, to get a little bit of formation in, start those conversations, and then get on with your busy day. Not that we're leaving the house these days, but
Yeah.
when we were.
Well, yeah, I think we share a lot in common, because I tell people that as well. My background as an eye doctor. I don't have a theology degree in a sense, but people ask me a lot of times, where do you learn all this stuff? And when I the best way I found to learn the faith is to teach the faith. And so I tell parents that a lot, that you don't have to know everything to teach anything. A lot of times, we hear that call that as parents, we're supposed to be the primary educators of the faith, but I think a lot of parents get intimidated by that because they feel like they don't know how. And so what you're doing is really, really, really helpful. And I've recommended the podcast to lots and lots of parents, because it is really just a great way to start the day. Like you said, it's just like a 5 to 7 minute podcast. You're a really great teacher. Like, you're really good at speaking to the kids, but more than anything, my target is always the parents. Like, I feel like I want to reach the parents at the same time. And I think you do that. I mean, I learn a lot, like listening to those little 5 to 7 minute snippets. So tell me a little bit more about how you come up with your topics, because I got to say that it's almost like you kind of are looking into our lives. When we first started listening to this podcast in the fall, my oldest daughter was preparing for confirmation, and you just happened to be going through the fruits of the Holy Spirit at that point, which is really, really cool. And then my youngest daughter is going through First Communion, and shortly after that, you started going through the sacraments. And then for my religious education, high school students, I decided I was going to go through the 7 deadly sins, and lo and behold, you chose the 7 deadly sins this Lent as well. So I'm just curious how you're picking your topics, and where do you get your information that you share with parents and kids?
Sure. So, number one, my topics come from people that listen. We have a really active Facebook group that is a gift for me as a parent, totally. And people suggest things in there, and people have been asking for what this year we kind of did a lot of responding to what people wanted. So they were begging for the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, because I think that's something that can be taught. If it's like taught in a textbook, it's pretty boring. And I even remember being formed for confirmation myself and being like, is this really exciting? This seems pretty boring. And there's just something about sort of changing the way that information is delivered, and like all of a sudden it's on a podcast coming through a phone, and it's better. I don't know. So a lot of it's responding, but I have to say one thing that we really did this year is, I think over the summer, we kind of realized that we had moved into ministry ground, which is an important thing to realize, because I think then if it allowed me to take what I do more seriously. And one of the things that we did is we came up with a motto, or a sort of a mission statement, I should say. And that is our mission statement for Catholic Sprouts is let the Eucharist lead, which, of course, in times of coronavirus is a little bit more challenging. But way back then over the summer, at the beginning of it, I personally committed to an hour of adoration just for the discernment of this ministry. And so I'm not going to say like it's divine inspiration the whole time I'm in there, but I do feel like things are coming together a little bit better. And sometimes I can even listen to a podcast episode with my own children and be surprised about the things I'm learning, even though I recorded it myself, which is a surreal experience. But we just being like, okay, this isn't just a fun project that I'm doing at home. We're actually in the territory of ministry now. So we're going to put discernment up towards the top and a dedication to Eucharistic adoration. And also we really try to, like I said, bring other wiser people into the mix too, to ask for feedback and to ask for ideas. So yeah. And so this month, or Lenten season, we're getting all of our 7 deadly sins information or content from Fulton Sheen's book, Victory Over Vice, which I could not recommend highly enough. Super amazing book. I love Fulton Sheen. But one of my favorite things to do on the podcast is to take adult content like that. Obviously, that is for adults to read. But to take it and to kind of think, how can I tell these same stories with the use of fables or kid-friendly examples? Because my big philosophy with Catholic Sprouts is that there's a few topics that we don't talk about for sure, that I don't want anyone to talk to my kids about except for me. But I feel like kids really can deal with serious things, and we shouldn't make things cheesy or water it down. But maybe they might need a story to help understand it. But I don't know. That's just my philosophy, that kids can deal with sometimes hard and sad things better than adults. So I always try to do the first material from which I'm pulling content for the podcast is serious adult spiritual works, and then we figure out ways to tell it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the things I appreciate about your podcast. It's real, it's solid, it's authentically Catholic, and you do tell a lot of stories. And I tell people that too. We read tons of stories to our kids, and sometimes we give them a lecture. They might forget everything, but if you tell them a story, they'll remember it for the rest of their life. And you're a good storyteller. I've also really enjoyed the week where you had Father K on the show and did the stories with the ninja priest. Absolutely loved it. Kids loved it every day. Left us on the edge of our seats every day waiting for the next day's podcast. And
I know. So he's my parish priest.
Is he really? Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I was like, thanks a lot. Now everyone's going to be super bummed out when I come back on Monday.
No. You tell stories really well as well, and I like how you implement the saints. As this week as we record this on the feast of Saint Joseph this morning. Saint Joseph, one of my favorite saints, one of our patrons, telling stories about him, and Saint Patrick a couple days ago. So implementing the saints into the topics that you're covering that week, also I think a great strategy. And I love the structure, just and your philosophy. I think we have in common as well. Do little things with great love. Obviously, the title of my book, Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission. There's some Saint Therese in there a little bit. That we do the ordinary things of life with great love, and kids, I think, learn great by repetition and just a little bit every day. And that's again what I tell parents. Like, if you can spend 7 minutes every day just getting a great story or a catechism lesson, those days add up and they get into a routine. And so every morning, 5 to 7 minutes is a great length for a podcast, because that's about our that's our drive to church or eating breakfast. And so I love how you structure the podcast, and I think parents really appreciate that as well. Tell us a little bit more about your upbringing. So were you raised Catholic? Where did your passion for learning and sharing the Catholic faith come from?
Sure. So, I was raised Catholic. I'm one of 5 myself. The thing about, I grew up in a really liberal diocese, to be honest. And I think a lot of adults struggle with poor formation just because of kind of the structure they grew up in. Anyway, so I went to Catholic school all throughout, but I had never been to adoration until I was well into college, which is just sad to me that you go to a Catholic school and you don't even know what adoration is. So, a lot of those there's a lot of places, unfortunately, where just things aren't totally Catholic or whatever. So anyway, but I was raised by a convert. My mom converted to Catholicism on her own before she got married. And although she didn't know every single thing there was, I think growing up with her, a convert zeal is a real thing. And she was always very interested in learning more. And I think a lot of parents hesitate to teach because they don't know everything, and they're worried that they're going to sort of come off looking dumb in front of their kids. But as a daughter of a convert who didn't know anything, and we all knew that, it was actually like a fun thing to learn together. And then, as time goes on, my youngest sister actually answered a call to become a nun. So she just took her final vows 2 years ago. She's a little sister of the Lamb. That's the name of their order. They're a French order, but she is currently in Kansas City, Kansas, which is their one American house. But then, and my family actually, through my husband's job, was relocated to Kansas City, Kansas for 3 years. We actually just moved back to Minnesota a couple months ago. And during that time, we got really close to her community. Her community has a charism to the poor, and they're a begging order. And I just think any sort of contact with a religious order is powerful for a whole family. But for some reason, that order, and just to watch women live such humble, joyful lives, it was a great reminder to me that, like, even though I'm home with, babies coming all the time, that we can still do really simple things. And it's not so important, how flashy things are. What's important is that we show up authentically. And I think for some reason, her community just really taught our whole family that you show up authentically and amazing things can happen. And so, like, honestly, I started the Catholic Sprouts podcast on a whim because I wanted something like this for my own children. And I just think it's been a real lesson to me that, like, you put some effort in and God will meet you. He will, just make your efforts bloom. And so, yeah, so all of those things, I know that's kind of a meandering answer, but.
I know I think definitely share a lot in common in our journeys, because it sounds very similar to my own journey. And sometimes I went into ministry kind of kicking and screaming as a raging introvert who didn't want to be up in front of people. And now, I've traveled across the country, and it was just amazing what God did with just, trying to write down my thoughts into a book is just crazy. But yeah, I think God's calling all of us to be that witness, and we can, learn with our kids. And I think Catholic moms are actually incredible. You fall into that category of those amazing Catholic moms who come up with all of these creative ideas. My wife is so creative. You should see the little altar thing that she made to St. Joseph today just for our lunch. She's just very, very creative. And that's what you do. You take some creativity, you make the faith fun, engaging, and it's just really helpful for the rest of us. So tell us a little bit more of your other things, because you don't just have a podcast. You also have a lot of great ideas and products. I have a lot of them all over the table here that we have tried. Maybe starting with the Jesus tree. So this is something that we're doing right now in the season of Lent. You have the Jesse tree. People are familiar with that. But you created this Jesus tree. So we're kind of reading through the Gospel of Matthew with this great little book that you created. And every day there's a little new symbol, and we just have a little Velcro that we made, and we just stick the little things on. The kids get to take turns putting them on there. So where did you come up with this idea? This is brilliant. Where did you come up with this idea of the Jesus tree and helping people kind of follow along through Lent?
Well, so I think we all create what we need, right? Advent was so when we first did the Jesse tree, which is an Advent, it was several years ago, and it was such a gift to me to be able to sit down each night knowing exactly what we were going to do for prayer, and having, it's like tactile with the ornaments. And anyways, it was just a real gift to me. And so it really made me think when Lent came around the next year, like, how can we have something that is every single day that somehow builds towards Lent with that excitement that we had in Advent? And so, I just thought, well, we're going through the whole Old Testament. Why not go through a gospel? And years ago, I had a priest recommend, I think he might have given it to me as penance after confession. I've had a priest that have given me like really intense penance. And he told me I needed to read the Gospel of Matthew for Lent. Which is a great gospel to read. It's pretty manageable. The chapters aren't too long. And I love, of course, the Gospel of John, but it can be a little deep even for adults. So the Gospel of Matthew is pretty accessible. And so just with his advice, and I did that years ago when I was single. To me, the Gospel of Matthew and Lent are so intertwined. I just really crave, especially with kids, to have something that is established for prayer every night. So that's what we did. And I know my kids love countdowns. So I'm like, well, I'll just create a little tree that they can stick the ornaments on. And
it's great, because I think, just the structure is helpful, because everybody has these grand ideas at the start of Lent or any season but we almost get overwhelmed with so many different ideas. But this makes it simple, and it gives you something that you can count on and do. And the countdown, with the tree and putting all the little symbols on there. Do you create these, like the art? Like, who's the artist? Who creates all of the artwork for your materials?
So if it's really simple, it's me.
Okay, awesome. Well, I was wondering because these are pretty phenomenal as far as just the artwork, everything. So,
well, there's lots of YouTube tutorials out there.
Okay.
But if it's more complicated, like we have some printed materials, like we have a board book set for the rosary. And actually just yesterday we came out with a Stations to the Cross book, like a picture book.
Yep.
And we have an illustrator that does all those things. His name is Reynaldo. He's great. So yeah, and what's amazing is that these things just sort of snowball, that we're to the point where we can work with an illustrator is sort of beyond what I ever thought would happen. So
yeah, and it's just really, really engaging the picture. And like you mentioned earlier, we kind of live in that time where everything's high tech and high definition, and there's lots of bells and whistles, and people are used to just visually engaging materials. And so you kind of, you have solid content, but you wrap them in a nice package that's going to get the kids' attention. And my kids love the Rosary board books as well. And then the Eucharist adoration, you talked about letting the Eucharist lead and how that gives you ideas. And I couldn't agree with that more as well. Also, by the way, just, I never try to talk without saying, come Holy Spirit, let my words be your words, that we have to let God kind of lead our ministry. But you've kind of helped people do that as well, as far as letting the Eucharist lead. You've created great resources for Eucharistic adoration and these different journals. My daughter has her journal here. She said, don't open it because she wrote in it. But, she uses the adoration materials that, and I'm the same way. I don't ever remember going to Eucharistic adoration growing up, but it's more available today. So tell people a little bit about some of the Eucharistic adoration materials that you've created to kind of help them kind of learn how to do Eucharistic adoration in a sense.
Sure. So, Eucharistic adoration, I think a lot of people think you can't go if you have kids, which it's like, I'm not going to lie, it's harder. It's trickier. I actually, with all the crazy church closures with coronavirus right now, we actually were at Eucharist adoration yesterday at a different time in a different place. And I had this old man give me such a dirty look. I thought his face was going to turn inside out. But, you just have to remember, like, Jesus spoke, let the children come to me. I'm going to let his thoughts and his words mean more to me than this man that maybe he has something else going on. Maybe he was grumpy about something else. I don't know. But I do think that we need to go into adoration with a couple of helps. And so one of the things I created is just a saint-based coloring book to be used in adoration, where kids can color the saints and then color in a really beautiful quote that they said specifically about the Eucharist. And there's just something beautiful. I tell my kids where we go in, remember, we're coloring pictures for Jesus. I want you to kneel down and say a prayer. Then you can get your coloring out. For older kids, we have a journal that actually my friend Gina wrote. And it's just kind of a way of praying through the Psalms in front of Jesus, which is such a cool thing to do because, of course, the Psalms are the way Jesus prayed. And so to be there praying the prayers that he prayed, it's sort of amazing. And then we also put together a little board book for children, for little ones, which is maybe my favorite thing because my oldest son, who just made his first communion, he likes to read that to the babies. And I can see it's all these like Eucharistic images from the gospel, like the feeding of 5,000 or, even the Last Supper, the resurrection, the crucifixion, of course, all of these things, with the symbol of the monstrance around it so that kids can hopefully make the connection between this shiny star thing up on the altar and then the stories they know from the gospel. But as he was reading that, I heard like one time when we were in adoration, he was reading it to our 3-year-old. And I actually heard him make an audible like, oh, and to me, like, it's those little things. I'm like, okay, all of it, totally worth it.
Yeah.
Even if nobody buys a book, totally worth it if you were able to make this connection. And then finally, we just put together a parent's guide because, I've been going to adoration for years and years now. So I can sort of walk in and even if I only have my 10 fingers to count for a rosary and a Bible sitting there, I can be fine. But I know when I started, I really wanted I wanted something like a plan, like a set of prayers in case I ran out of things, because it can be unnerving. So I just really thought, like, what can I hand to a family so that they can really think, yep, we can do adoration. We can go in there. I'm not going to feel like we don't belong there anymore.
Awesome. And yeah, we've utilized all of those things. We got the whole Eucharistic adoration package. We love them. Kind of showing the audience kind of pictures of some of these things in the board book. And I really recommend this for people if you've maybe never been to adoration, or you just kind of like a guide, especially bringing kids. And I like in the parents guide how you tell them, don't worry about them being a distraction. They will for some people, and but most people, I think they love to see little kids come to Jesus. It's just that's going to lift up the people that are there, even if they're making some noise sometimes. But that's how they learn, and it's the same thing.
For every one grumpy person we've met in there, we've easily met 10 people that are like, oh, thank you for bringing the kids. So I think that uplifts people when they see you young parents making the effort. And that's the only way the kids, like I said, will learn. Just like with Mass, if you try to bring them once or twice a year, they're just not going to get it. They're going to misbehave. But if you're bringing them on a repetition, so powerful, continuous, and that's how they build relationships, is repetition. And so we want to introduce them and bring them to Jesus. And so highly recommend those adoration materials as well. And so the other thing I just really like about what you do with the podcast, especially, is you do give the kids something to work on. You give them a challenge every day. You send them patches, which we'll put a letter in the mail today. I think Mariah, my youngest, has about 4 patches she's trying to get here. So you give them a challenge, and then when they meet that challenge, you send them a little patch, kind of like Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever, but it's these Catholic pouches or patches. And so another genius idea. Did you is that just kind of like the motivation you kind of came up with to get people to kind of keep listening and do the challenges, or where'd you come up with that? Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember. We just sort of, I'm kind of an idea person. I kind of am like, oh, what about that? What about that? I'm not sure. I think I just sort of ordered some patches, and then people liked them, so we kept doing it. I wish I could say it was part of some genius plan, but it's not.
Usually it's the simplest things, and I'm not above bribery. If I'll bribe my kids for treats or rewards or whatever, but it's a great thing because they're striving for something, and it gives them something to work on each day. So I think another great strategy that your podcast has to give them something to work on. So I really can't recommend your podcast high enough. It's been something that's been really powerful for our family. We listen to it every day, and the topics that you use, the things that you teach, the ideas that you give kids, very, very powerful. So I just want to commend you for that, and all the other materials that you're creating for people. So everybody out there, I want you to check out Catholic Sprouts. Subscribe to the podcast, absolutely free, 5 to 7 minutes a day. Very simple. And it actually helps you as a parent to catechize your kid as well. So Nancy, I thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and explaining all the stuff you do, and for all the work that you're doing to help us as parents to raise the next generation of saints.
Thanks. This is a total honor. And let's do it. Let's become saints, right? Let's do it.
That's our goal. That's our dream. That's our mission, is to become saints. So until our next episode, I just want to challenge everybody with that mission and goal of becoming saints. And remember just to try your best and trust in God's grace to do all the rest.
The Extraordinary Mission Podcast was brought to you by the Deep Roots Club, a group of people investing their time, talent, and treasures into helping today's families build deep roots of faith that can weather any storm. Find out more at www.extraordinarymission.com/get-involved.